welcome everybody to a Friday edition of the Orange Bloods Texas Football YouTube channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum, joined by Anwar Richardson. Do us a solid going into the weekend. Hit that like button. If we entertain you even a little bit on this video, it helps. As does subscribing to the channel. We do videos daily, and as we get closer and into the football season, I can assure you that you won't just want to be on orangebloods.com. You'll want to be on the Orange Bloods YouTube channel. Hopefully today will be further evidence of where that can get you. And today, Anwar, going into the weekend, hey, we're going to play the hits. You've got the Texas Longhorns. They're really in the middle of already because some of the visits began yesterday. But it is one of the biggest visit weekends of the year. It's weird. It is still a brave new world for us post-pandemic to have kids on campus and the coaches able to meet with players in the middle of the recruiting process. It had almost become a foreign thing after the past year, but they're back, second consecutive weekend of the year. And what's really interesting about this weekend, and I'm, it's funny, I did a lunch bunch event in Houston yesterday with a bunch of longtime Orange Blood subscribers. And we talked about how the junior day portion of this is maybe the single greatest collection of underclassmen talent that you'll have found. I think you could make a case. And look, I can't prove it by going back and looking at every single recruiting weekend list that Texas has ever had. But I don't think you'll have ever found in the history of the Texas program a better collection of underclass talent coming in this weekend, headlined by Arch Manning, who we've already done and committed a video towards, headlined by Rueben Owens, a guy that we've done podcasts and videos on, headlined by a lot of guys, the number one player in the state for 2023 in the state of Texas. He'll be on hand. There's a lot of stuff involved in this. And oh, by the way, there will be a 5-star offensive lineman on campus on Saturday. It is a huge weekend, but the backbone of all of this isn't even a group of players that will sign in this year's recruiting class. Texas has really gone out of its way to take a very valuable weekend and direct it mostly towards the players that will be juniors on the field this year in the state of Texas.
I mean, it's really impressive. I mean, like when you talk about the A-list of recruits that are here, and it's impressive enough to be able to pull it all off on the same weekend. I mean, these guys have plenty of options of places that they can visit, and so to kind of make that a priority in the sell and the pitch it catch, in order to say, hey, this is a weekend we want you here, and then for them to listen. Right now, it's the off season, but it's a recruiting win. It's a recruiting win to get those guys on campus that, in all of them as a collection to say, man, you guys could be a part of something special, to try to get them all talking and being on the same page. It shows us, Catch, and it means that in the short period of time, Sarkisian has the attention of the top guys. Like, he has the attention. Catch, with all due respect to Tom Herman, and Tom Herman was here as the coach this year, this kind of event doesn't happen. I don't believe you get these kind of major names on campus the same time at the same weekend. I think there would be a lot of wait and see what happens in the season. And we know what wait and see usually means. So, for the staff, and we always talk about what they need to do. We've talked about a catch of, A&M and what they're doing in Alabama and Ohio State. We've talked about that at length. But the start and this first step is actually getting guys to listen and then getting them on campus. And so that's a really good first step in order to be able to do that. Now, hopefully the barrels are gone for pitchers, and hopefully there's a little bit more of a cooler background for them to take some photos. But all jokes aside, like it's a win right now for Sarkisian, just an early win in the first quarter of recruiting. Obviously, there's a long way to go, but just getting on the campus the same weekend, pretty big, and kudos to that staff.
Well, I think what's really unique about it, the coaching staff is in the middle of hosting kids in this, and they will have players on official visits this weekend from the 2022 class. I mean, you've got Cole Hudson, offensive lineman from Frisco, who may be a future member of this recruiting class. You've got offensive lineman Jacob Sexton out of Oklahoma. You've got Zach Swanson, who's a Texas commitment out of the Phoenix area. You've got Anthony Jones, a defensive lineman out of Nevada. You've got Sebastian Cheeks, a linebacker from Evanston, Illinois. So you've got 4 out-of-state players in this recruiting class, plus Cole Hudson coming in. That doesn't even include the unofficial visitors. Cam Dewberry is coming in on Saturday. That's the expectation. Dewberry actually in College Station today and expected to visit A&M officially next week. So they're A&M getting him twice in essentially 8 days is kind of an example of why people think that A&M is the leader for Cam Dewberry, but that he'll be on campus this weekend in an unofficial capacity is a chance for Texas to land a blow, to make an impact, to make the kind of statement that says, I want to come back again. Because my general rule on visits before the pandemic happened was that if you're Texas, the way you get big time commitments from big time prospects is you get them on campus a half dozen times during their recruiting process. And that sounds like a lot until you realize you've got junior days, you've got home games in football, you've got the Texas relays, you've got official visits, you've got junior days and unofficial visits. The more you're able to accumulate visits, especially with the in-state kids, the much more likely you're establishing the relationship that you're looking for and going to be a real factor. You start, kid visits your campus 6 times and you don't get him, that's kind of a disaster.
Yeah.
But when you're the in-state program, like that's the advantage that you have in a recruitment against Alabama, in a recruitment against Clemson or Ohio State. You can get these kids on campus. Even a guy like Caleb Burton, who's committed to Ohio State and is loyal to Ohio State, there's a world where you can still get him on your campus more times than Ohio State will, because fate sometimes allows for that to happen. And I think when you look at this 2023 class of players, and real quickly, let me run down a few of the names so that you get an idea. When I say that the heavy hitters are coming to town, my LSR Top 100 list for 2023, which came out earlier in the spring, is a little outdated because it hasn't been updated yet through the spring. But on that list, you've got the number 1 player in the state in Anthony Hill, the linebacker from Denton Ryan. He's coming in. The number 2 player is Rueben Owens, Texas commit. He'll be here for 2 days. He's in town. You go to the number 3 player in the state, Javian Toviano from Arlington Martin, the number 3. He's in. Anthony James, he's in. Jalen Hell, he's in. The top 5 players in the 2023 class are all in town either yesterday, today, tomorrow, or some combination of those 2 days. It doesn't end there. You've got the number 7 player in Avion Carter, a defensive end out of Amarillo. He's in town. It just goes on and on and on. Harris Sewell, an offensive lineman from Odessa Permian. Jaden Greathouse, the Austin Westlake wide receiver / H-back. He was in town. Now we're almost at a point where we're talking about double-digit attendees from the top 14 or 15 players in the state of Texas. It doesn't matter. Could Tom Herman have done it maybe early in his tenure? Could Mac Brown have done it? Certainly so. But I personally don't remember ever there being a weekend where the incoming junior class, so a junior day essentially, is full of almost all of the elite prospects in the entire state of Texas. And for most of these kids, this will be their first visit because unless they went to the Texas relays, unless they've been to the state track meet, unless they've gone out of their way to make a visit, this is the first chance for Texas to make. You take a kid like Avion Carter from Amarillo. That is not a short drive. You're in Amarillo. You're almost as close to LA as you are to Texas.
That's a long. I've been to Amarillo. That's you got to want it.
You have to want to get to Amarillo. So I can't speak with certainty that a kid like Avion Carter has never taken a visit yet to the University of Texas, but he just finished up his sophomore year. He's not even into his junior season. There's a very good chance that this weekend is the statement maker. It's the tone setter. And I think if you're the University of Texas and you're this coaching staff, you know that. You know that when these kids leave campus, if the word great, if the term perfect 10 isn't being said, then you probably have let an opportunity get away. If you're Texas, this weekend for the junior class to be has to be about establishing a tone that suggests that the overwhelming majority of these guys will end up in Austin. That is easier said than done, but that's the mission. And for me, the tough part isn't making that sales pitch. It's not, coming up with the sales pitch that works. It really is getting these guys all on campus in the first place, because every single one of these guys, Anwar, has invites from schools all over the country. And and given how many schools want to get their hands on guys, because it's a free for all this month in the month of June, as kids try to sneak in as many visits as they can, since they haven't visited anywhere in the last 15 months, to be able to synchronize this in a way. It might be the single most impressive thing that I think Steve Sarkisian has done in a short tenure that doesn't yet include, obviously, a game. But in recruiting, as a recruiting guy, I'm impressed.
I'm thinking back to, I was trying to look it up as we're talking, but I mean, this is Steve Sarkisian getting back to what he did back at USC. It's remnants of it, right? Because we can't forget that when he was at USC, he did finish with a #1 recruiting class. That happened. And what I was going to do is look up the guys that were in that class. But, we know that, it's sometimes we knock Sarkisian because we say, okay, well, sure, he coached with Nick Saban, but anybody can coach with Nick Saban, right? And anyone can look great with Nick Saban. And so sometimes there's a little bit of a knock that we put on Sarkisian. You said, well, you got to see what he can do as a head coach, right? Because he looked at some of the body of work in Washington, and it was like, okay, you didn't really have double-digit wins. So that's one way you can knock him. But where you can't knock him is when it comes to recruiting. Because if you say, well, what did you do without Nick Saban? Well, you can say, yeah, before I even stepped foot in Tuscaloosa, I was able to produce a #1 recruiting class in the freaking country. So we know that he's got some recruiting chops. We know he's got, a way of words. We know that there's a trust level that's established there. And so really, as impressive as it really is Steve Sarkisian being back to that USC version as a recruiter that we saw before. And that it is very impressive to get that, guys back. When you talk about all the guys again, I think it's huge. And you talk about the importance of getting guys on campus 5-6 times, whatever. Rueben Owens is a perfect example of that. I mean, this is a guy who commits to you, but then all of a sudden is starting to look at other places. All of a sudden and these kids love these visits. They love to go to these different places and put on different uniforms, put the pictures out there and have everyone go crazy, have the new fan base go crazy, the old fan base go crazy. They love this kind of attention. Getting a guy like Rueben Owens back and say, okay, I know you went and had some visits. Where'd you have fun at? What was it? Florida, LSU? I think some of the places he may have visited. And then you could say, come here, here's Texas. And he goes, oh, that's right. I do like Texas a lot. Hey, Coach Drayton, how you been, man? And reestablishing that in person, which is, they haven't really been able to do a lot of. I mean, this has been a Zoom world since the pandemic. To be able to do that in person, Catch, again, it's a really, really good start. And for Steve Sarkisian, reestablishing himself as a recruiter, as a head coach of a program, not just an assistant, but as the head.
Well, and to kind of wrap up our conversation here, I think it's also important to stress that if you're a Texas fan trying to judge how this weekend went, the expectations almost certainly can't be that a bunch of guys commit. And if they don't, then you didn't have a good weekend. It will be really difficult to judge the weight of this weekend and how important it was, probably for another 12 months. But in 12 months, if Texas is on the verge of putting a top 5 recruiting class together, we can do a YouTube video where we look back and say, remember a year ago when they had that junior day and all of these guys that they're in on now came together? That's the other thing. And it's somewhat of a dangerous, risky proposition when you do this. All of these guys will leave town this weekend and they'll be on a Snapchat group together and they'll be texting each other. And if Sark and this group get it going, they'll be communicating as kind of, remember when we got together at the, Arch Manning will be in that group, and he's not a Texas kid, but he'll have visited this weekend. So he'll be in this club of guys that are taking visits together and discussing their recruitments together. If Texas has a really big season, if Texas has the type of season that we've been talking about for weeks where 9-3, 10-2, something that feels like a true launching off point to something bigger, then you're going to have all these guys talking about it. I think part of what caused Texas to lose Quinn Ewers really was that he was in these types of groups when Texas lost a couple of games and had that whole Eyes of Texas thing going on. And I think he's getting communication from his peers where it's like, yo, man, that's not where it's at. And we're not going there. And what you want if you're Texas is the opposite of that. You want these kids to come in, leave town like the kids from last weekend were, joking with each other on social media, talking about constantly being in touch with one another. If you're Texas, this is the big, really, Arch Manning and Rueben Owens are already doing this together, right? But it's another thing to add another half dozen kids from the state of Texas that are suddenly in this cool kids club. And if you're Texas, you want all of them to come together. Very similar to Tom Herman's first full recruiting class when so many kids in the Houston area made up the majority of the big time prospects in that 2018 recruiting class. Now, Brennan Eagles didn't pan out the way everybody thought that he might. And BJ Foster hasn't yet panned out. And Alvonte Woodard, and you can go on and on down the list of names. But that year, there were the overwhelming, almost like 10 of the top 15 were from the greater Houston area, and they were all in a clique together. That is what you want if you're Texas. Start this clique, and it be the Texas clique. And if you can maintain that moving forward by keeping your play on the field strong enough, then this has a chance to be, Jack planting the beanstalk. Eventually that thing gets to be really impressive. But when you put it into the ground, a lot of people just wonder, what are you doing with beans? And I think that this weekend is all about setting the table. And I'll be looking to hear what code words do they use? Was this a great visit or was this a very good visit? And the little distinctive things will give you an idea of just how much it popped this weekend. But if they get it right, I think this has a chance to be the most important weekend of the Steve Sarkisian era that we've seen to date.
Hey, that you said it all. You said it in a mouthful. All I want to say is thank you guys for supporting us. I know I'll let Ketch wrap it up, and thank you for supporting. Thank you for always watching our videos, and appreciate it. Appreciate all the feedback. So we're going to keep the good hits coming for you, hopefully.
Like the video, subscribe to the channel. We'll be back on Monday, probably overreacting. People love our Overreaction Monday show. That's what will be coming on Monday. You can almost bet the house there will be some recruiting discussion inside of that, coming off of a weekend where we will hype it up quite a bit. Just look at the headline of this video. Until Monday, for myself and Anwar Richardson, thanks for watching. We'll do it again soon. You guys be good to each other. Take care.